Boss buffs are one of the most impactful things you can do for your character, enabling you to progress into new bosses. So here's a list of all the various buffs you can get in order of how easy they are to obtain. Guild Blessings. Once a week, head over to the light bulb on the left side of your screen, accept the DSG potion quest at the bottom, and you get up to 30 blessings which give 30 attack or magic attack for 30 minutes. Next, open your guild window, head to the Guild Skills tab, and here you can find the Noblesse Guild skills. The level of these skills will vary depending on what guild you're in, and your access to them may be restricted depending on whether or not you actively participate in Guild Culvert. These are one of the largest damage increases of all the buffs I'm about to list, and they are one of the most important. Next, the Fame buff. Head to the Zakum boss, because this is where a lot of people like to park themselves on their level 275 or 250 chairs, and preferably fame a level 275 person. This gives a monstrous 50 weapon attack or magic attack buff, but since it is tied to fame, you can only receive this once a day per character. Next, the Hero's Echo buff. This is a 2-hour cooldown skill that gives you 4% weapon attack and magic attack, and it lasts 40 minutes. This can be obtained at level 200 by going to the 8th floor of the Orbis Tower, although some classes might obtain this differently, I'm not sure. And if you're doing consecutive bosses, getting a Buccaneer to use Time Leap can reset the cooldown of your Hero's Echo. Next up is your Housekeeper buff tied to the housing system. This buff's strength depends on your Housekeeper's closeness, which all you need to do is talk to them every day to raise this. This buff can go up to 15% boss damage for 30 minutes, but can only be used once a day per world. Now we're getting into the ones that cost some kind of resource to use and aren't infinitely renewable, technically. Starting with the Candied Apple purchased from the Show It Town merchant. This gives 7 to all stats for 30 minutes, and it is the weakest buff on this list, but as it is very cheap, you may as well get it. When you're doing progression, everything counts. These do expire, so just buy what you need for the week. Next is the Monster Park Extreme Potions. Blue for magic attack, red for attack, and green if your class needs the attack speed. The red buff also gives HP if you're one of the few people who actually mains Demon Avenger. Next is the Ursus buff. The materials needed to purchase this from Aisha the NPC can be received from fighting Ursus, which you should be doing anyway just for the daily meso. These are atmospheric buffs that gives 30 attack or magic attack to the entire map that it's used on, and should be purchased on an as needed basis as they do expire quickly. Next are the Legion attack buffs. These can be purchased from the Legion vendor and last 10, 20, or 30 minutes. These give 30 attack and magic attack, and they can be purchased up to 10 times a week, and each character has their own stock of 10. And while you're here, you should pick up a Legion drop buff whenever you're doing a boss where you really need a drop, because this does stack with things like familiars and double drop cards if you are fortunate enough to still have some. Lastly, in this category of buffs, we have the Princess No Overpower buff. Now this buff does conflict with some other buffs, namely the Onyx Apple if you're willing to do a Moria PQ to get some, the Tengu buff, or even the Cold Winter Energy if you still have some of those lying around. But given that this is the most reliable and easy to get one for almost any player, this is my preferred buff. It gives 40 attack or magic attack for 30 minutes, which is an excellent buff and can be obtained from standing on the top left platform of the Princess No boss fight after she is killed. You can even get it on practice mode, so you can get this multiple times a week as long as you're willing to actually go through the Princess No fight. And given how long the pink whale can take for certain classes, this is always a good idea to be the first buff you pick up, but do prepare all your other buffs as you want to hit them one after the other, that way they get their full duration. Now for the final category of some buffs that are a little bit harder to obtain or just require a little bit of work or upkeep. Boss elixirs. Now these things come in a few different forms, but you're mostly going to be focused on either the boss damage or the IED one depending on your own needs. These things can be dropped from various different bosses such as Lomian or Akechi, or can even be bought from Fedric, the NPC that can spawn after Root Abyss bosses die. Just know that the ones that Fedric sell are not always what you want, and sometimes only work in the Root Abyss. Next are the Advanced Stat Potion X's. These will correspond to the main stat you need and last for a half hour and give you 30 of your main stat, and these do scale off of all your percent stats from your gear. As a potion, this means you are going to need to learn the alchemy profession as well as herbalism to get the actual resources you need to make them. Speaking of professions, here you can get either a second alchemy elixir buff or a buff from smithing via their whetstones. Both the crafted alchemy elixirs or the smithing stones can be used in conjunction with one of the potions dropped from bosses, just not together. You have to pick a combination of boss elixir and smithing stone, or boss elixir and alchemy elixir. This will depend entirely on the needs of your class and your own preferences on just what profession you would prefer. As these can be quite costly to make, these are the absolute last buff you should ever consider using in my opinion. Only use them when you think you absolutely need them. Much like Onyx apples if you want to go down the route of getting those things. Okay, there is one more category, but this one requires other players and you can't really control it yourself unless you have a second account. This being Wild Hunter buffs, or Bishop Door if you need extra lives. Now you need a friend with a Wild Hunter that has a lot of buff duration, preferably from Legion, Inner Ability, and a mechanic card to maximize their buff duration and give you a real Sharp Eyes if your class still needs it in case you're not a bowman, and Call of the Wild buff which gives you a 10% attack buff, both of which lasting over 10 minutes. They're not going to last for the whole boss fight, but they are going to be very impactful while they're there and can really allow you to kill a boss that you otherwise wouldn't be able to kill. And then finally, there is the MVP attack buff that depending on your level of MVP, which is gained through spending money in the cash shop, you can get a 30 attack buff a couple times a week or more if you're a higher MVP. Outside of these, you have event buffs. These are entirely dependent on whatever event is going on, and they can be quite potent. It's just they're not reliable, you know? Whatever event is going on may or may not have buffs. And that is everything. So remember to buff up, be conservative with some of the buffs that take either a lot of materials or you have a very limited amount of, only use what you need. All of these buffs can let you progress way further beyond your gear level naturally would let you. I know because as a solo player, I needed to find these things to get every little bit of power I could. So good luck. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my members of my patrons for supporting me as always, and I'll see you in the next one.